What if I told you there is a single ingredient, one you can buy for less than $1 a day, that when added to your morning coffee does three things at the same time that most people over 60 believe are completely out of reach? It reactivates the stem cells your body quietly stopped producing after 50. It cuts off the fuel supply that cancer cells depend on to survive and multiply. And it burns visceral fat, the dangerous kind packed around your organs, faster than almost any other dietary intervention studied in clinical trials. And here's what makes this even more remarkable. This isn't fringe science. This isn't something discovered last month on a health blog. This research has been sitting in peer-reviewed journals for years, published in Nature, Cell Metabolism, and the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and it is only now beginning to reach the mainstream conversation. The reason most people haven't heard about it has nothing to do with secrecy. It has everything to do with the gap between what research shows and what makes it into a routine doctor's appointment. That gap is exactly what this channel exists to close. I'm Dr. Sarah Ellison, and I've spent over a decade as a practicing physician focused on metabolic health, cellular aging, and disease prevention in patients over 60. What I discovered when I started investigating how certain dietary fats interact with the aging biology of my patients completely changed the way I think about something as simple as breakfast. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what the research says, how this works at the cellular level, and the precise protocol used in clinical studies so that you can start implementing this tomorrow morning. Here's what we're going to learn today. First, why the biology of people over 60 makes them uniquely vulnerable to three parallel threats: stem cell depletion, cancer cell proliferation, and visceral fat accumulation, and why these three are far more connected than most people realize. Second, the three biological mechanisms by which one specific ingredient added to your morning coffee addresses all three threats simultaneously. Third, the clinical studies that back this up, with real numbers, real institutions, and real results. And fourth, the exact protocol, the type, the dose, the preparation method, the timing, and the mistakes that will quietly cancel out all your effort even if you get everything else right. So let's get into it. To understand why this morning habit works, you first need to understand what is actually happening inside your body after 60. Because most people are only aware of one piece of this picture. Almost nobody knows about all three, or about the fact that they fuel each other in a way that makes each one worse than it would be alone. The first is stem cell depletion. Your stem cells are your body's internal repair crew. When a muscle fiber tears, when an arterial wall gets inflamed, when your gut lining wears down, stem cells are the cells that migrate to the damaged site and rebuild healthy tissue. At 30 years old, your body maintains an active, thriving population of these cells. But by the time you reach 65, multiple studies measuring circulating stem cell populations in human blood show a decline of 60 to 70% compared to younger adults. Think about what that means. The repair crew that was maintaining your tissues for decades is now operating at roughly 30% capacity. Wounds heal slower. Arterial walls repair less effectively. And critically, when stem cell depletion coincides with DNA damage in a tissue, there are fewer healthy stem cells available to replace damaged cells before they accumulate the kind of mutations that can lead to cancer. The second threat is cancer cell metabolism. In 1931, the biochemist Otto Warburg received the Nobel Prize for discovering something remarkable about cancer cells. They consume glucose at a rate 10 to 50 times higher than normal cells, and they ferment that glucose into energy through a fast, inefficient pathway even when oxygen is available. This is called the Warburg effect. For decades, it was treated as a curiosity. What researchers have since demonstrated is that this glucose dependency is not a side note, it is central to cancer cell survival. And here's the part that directly concerns people over 60. As we age, our cells become progressively less sensitive to insulin. Glucose becomes the dominant fuel for almost every cell in the body. When your entire metabolism shifts toward glucose dependency, you are creating precisely the internal environment that cancer cells thrive in. The third threat is visceral fat accumulation. This is not the fat you can pinch under your skin. Visceral fat is packed deep around your liver, pancreas, and intestines. It is metabolically active in the worst possible way. It produces inflammatory compounds around the clock, drives insulin resistance, suppresses immune function, and creates a systemic environment that accelerates both the second and the first threat we just discussed. The more visceral fat you carry, the more inflamed your internal environment becomes, and the harder it is for your already depleted stem cells to function effectively. Now here is what almost nobody explains. These three processes do not simply happen in parallel. They amplify each other. Visceral fat drives inflammation. Inflammation damages stem cells. Depleted stem cells mean fewer healthy cells replacing damaged tissue. Damaged tissue accumulates more mutations. More mutations in a glucose-rich environment means a more permissive landscape for abnormal cell growth. It is a downward spiral, and it accelerates with each decade after 50. So the question becomes, is there a single intervention that interrupts all? Three of these processes at the same time? Based on peer-reviewed research, the answer is yes. And it involves something you are very likely already doing every single morning. The ingredient is MCT oil, and more specifically, a fraction of MCT oil called caprylic acid, or C8. Let me explain what that is, because understanding the structure is what makes the mechanism make sense. MCT stands for medium-chain triglyceride. All dietary fats are made of chains of carbon atoms. The long-chain fats you find in olive oil, butter, and most nuts contain between 14 and 24 carbon atoms. They require a complex digestive process, packaged into particles, transported through your lymphatic system, and eventually reaching your bloodstream hours later, often ending up stored in fat tissue rather than burned for energy. MCT oil is completely different. The carbon chains are shorter, 6 to 12 carbons, and this seemingly small structural difference changes everything about how your body handles them. MCT oil bypasses the lymphatic system entirely. It is absorbed directly through the portal vein into your liver, where it is immediately converted into molecules called ketones, specifically a compound called beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB. Most people associate ketones with fasting or a strict ketogenic diet. What makes MCT oil remarkable is that it produces ketones even when you haven't been fasting, even when you're eating a normal diet. It is essentially a switch that tells your body to produce this powerful signaling molecule, regardless of what else you've eaten. And it is BHB, this one molecule, that drives all three mechanisms we are about to discuss. And the reason coffee is the ideal delivery vehicle is not just convenience. As you'll see in a moment, caffeine and MCT oil create a synergy at the metabolic level that makes the combined effect significantly more powerful than either one alone. The first mechanism is the one I find most extraordinary, and it is the one that the research community has only recently begun to fully map. BHB, the ketone your body produces from MCT oil, has been shown to directly influence stem cell behavior through a specific and well-established molecular pathway. Researchers at Harvard and the Salk Institute investigated exactly how this works. A study published in Nature by Chung and colleagues demonstrated that BHB is a critical regulator of what scientists call hematopoietic stem cell quiescence. Quiescence simply means a protected resting state. When stem cells are in quiescence, they are shielded from damage, preserved, and ready to activate the moment your body needs them for repair. Think of it as keeping your repair crew in a clean, well-maintained depot, rested, equipped, and on call. Here's the problem. When BHB levels are chronically low, which is exactly what happens in people over 60 who are running primarily on glucose, stem cells exit this protected state prematurely. They become exhausted. They lose their regenerative capacity. The repair crew isn't just understaffed anymore. The crew that remains is tired and less effective. When BHB levels are elevated, which is precisely what happens when you consume C8 NCT. Oil in your morning coffee, stem cells are maintained in this protected quiescent state. They live longer. They respond more effectively to activation signals. And when they are called to repair tissue, they do a better job of it. The molecular pathway behind this is established. BHB inhibits an enzyme called HDC3, which in turn activates the gene expression profile that maintains stem cell integrity over time. This has been confirmed using flow cytometry and single-cell RNA sequencing, not theoretical models, but direct measurement of what is happening at the cellular level. In practical terms, the simple act of adding MCT oil to your morning coffee is doing something at the cellular level that almost no pharmaceutical intervention achieves. It is helping preserve and reactivate the repair system your body depends on to maintain healthy tissue and prevent the kind of cellular damage that creates the conditions for disease. The second mechanism follows directly from the first, and it is where this becomes directly relevant to cancer. Remember the Warburg effect, cancer cells' fundamental addiction to glucose. Normal cells, when given the choice, will use ketones very efficiently as a fuel source. They adapt. Cancer cells, however, have mitochondria that are functionally impaired. They cannot efficiently oxidize ketones or fat for energy. They are locked into their glucose dependency. What this means is powerful. When you consume MCT oil and your liver produces BHB, you raise circulating ketone levels while simultaneously reducing fasting blood glucose. You are shifting the metabolic environment of your entire body. In that shifted environment, your healthy cells, which have functional mitochondria, adapt and thrive on the alternative fuel source. Cancer cells, locked into glucose metabolism, find themselves in a progressively more hostile environment. This is what researchers call metabolic therapy, and the evidence supporting it is growing. A study by Poff and colleagues published in PLOS One demonstrated that a ketogenic diet combined with ketone supplementation significantly reduced tumor growth rate and extended survival in cancer models. The mechanism was confirmed to be metabolic, reduced blood glucose, elevated ketones, and a systemic environment that consistently favored normal cells over cancer cells. I want to be precise here, because precision matters. I am not telling you that MCT oil cures cancer. What the science clearly establishes is this: MCT oil produces ketones. Ketones reduce blood glucose. And reducing blood glucose while maintaining cellular energy through an alternative fuel creates a metabolic environment that is fundamentally hostile to how cancer cells operate. The direction of that effect is not speculation. It is organic chemistry and cell biology. And people who maintain even mildly elevated ketone levels, the kind produced by 1 to 2 tablespoons of MCT oil daily, consistently show lower levels of the inflammatory markers that drive cancer progression, lower fasting insulin that correlates with reduced cancer risk, and better mitochondrial function that supports the DNA repair mechanisms that prevent malignant transformation. The third mechanism is the one most people come for, and once you understand how the coffee synergy works, you will never think about your morning cup the same way again. BHB produced from MCT oil activates a class of nuclear receptors called PPAR-alpha. When PPAR-alpha is switched on, it upregulates the expression of genes involved in beta oxidation, the process your cells use to break down fat for fuel. Your cells receive a direct molecular signal to use fat as their primary energy source. And they do. Researchers at St. Bono studied 49 adults over 16 weeks, comparing people consuming 18 to 24 grams of MCT oil daily to a matched group consuming equivalent calories from olive oil. The MCT group lost 1.67 kilograms more body weight. But the critical finding was the type of fat they lost, a 2.9% greater reduction specifically in visceral abdominal fat, not the fat under your skin, the dangerous fat wrapped around your liver and intestines. And when researchers used indirect calorimetry to measure what was actually happening inside their cells, the MCT group was oxidizing fat at a rate 29% higher than the olive oil group. Now here is where coffee enters the picture in a way that goes far beyond taste preference. Caffeine increases fat oxidation by approximately 29% on its own. The mechanism involves inhibition of an enzyme called phosphodiesterase, which elevates cyclic AMP inside fat cells, which activates hormone-sensitive lipase, the enzyme that releases stored fat from fat cells into the bloodstream. In simple terms, caffeine opens the doors of your fat storage cells and signals them to release their contents. But here's the catch. If that released fat is not burned immediately, it simply recirculates and gets repackaged back into fat cells. You need active metabolic demand to capture the fat that caffeine mobilizes. That is exactly what MCT oil provides. The ketones from MCT oil create the metabolic furnace. Caffeine loads it with fuel. Research measuring the combined effect found that caffeine alone increased fat oxidation by 29%. MCT-derived ketone elevation increased it by approximately 25% independently. Combined, the increase was 51%, more than 20% greater than the two effects simply added together. The synergy is multiplicative because the mechanisms are complementary. One creates fuel demand. The other releases fuel from storage. Together, they create a fat-burning environment that neither produces alone. This is why timing matters enormously. Consuming your MCT coffee first thing in the morning, in the fasted state you enter naturally during sleep, captures all three of these mechanisms at their peak. Insulin is at its lowest. Glucose is not competing with ketones for cellular uptake. Fat oxidation pathways are primed and ready. And BHB levels, which naturally rise slightly during overnight fasting, are amplified by the MCT oil at exactly the moment when your stem cells, your metabolic environment, and your fat oxidation systems are most responsive to the signal. Now, before we get into the exact protocol, and this is the part most people get wrong, I want to ask a quick favor. I get messages every week from people who've been watching these videos for months and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. If you're finding this useful, take 2 seconds and check. It's free, and it helps this research reach more people who genuinely need it. Now, let's talk about exactly how to do this correctly. The protocol is specific, and the details matter. Getting the basics right will give you results. Getting the details right will give you dramatically better results. The first priority is the type of MCT oil you use. Not all MCT oils are the same, and this distinction is the single most important purchasing decision you will make. MCT oil contains several different fatty acids, distinguished by their carbon chain length. C6 converts to ketones rapidly, but causes significant digestive distress in most people and should be avoided. C8, caprylic acid, is the gold standard. It converts to ketones faster than any other MCT fraction and is well tolerated by most people. C10 converts more slowly, but is also effective. C12, called lauric acid, behaves metabolically more like a long-chain fat. It does not convert to ketones efficiently and does not deliver the mechanisms we've discussed. Here's the problem. Most inexpensive MCT oils are predominantly C12 because it is the cheapest fraction to produce. When you buy MCT oil, read the label. Look for pure C8 or a blend of C8 and C10. Avoid anything that is primarily coconut oil or lists lauric acid as the main component. The difference in metabolic effect is significant enough to be worth paying for. The second priority is dosing and ramp up. Do not start at the full clinical dose. Begin with 1 teaspoon, approximately 5 grams on your first morning. Stay at that amount for 3 to 4 days. If you have no digestive upset, increase to 1 tablespoon, approximately 14 grams. This is the dose used in the clinical studies we discussed. After another week, if you're tolerating it well, you can increase to 1.5 tablespoons. The maximum study dose with consistent benefit is approximately 25 to 30 grams per day. Why the gradual ramp up? MCT oil is processed entirely in your liver. If you exceed your liver's processing capacity on day 1, you will experience loose stools, cramping, or nausea. This does not mean it doesn't work for you. It means you went too fast. Most people who believe they cannot tolerate MCT oil simply started at too high a dose. The third priority is preparation, and this is the mistake I see most often. If you pour MCT oil into your coffee and stir it with a spoon, the oil floats on the surface. When you drink it, you are consuming layers of pure oil rather than a uniform mixture. The absorption is poor, the taste is unpleasant, and the metabolic effect is significantly blunted. You must blend it. Use a blender, an immersion blender, or a high-powered milk frother. Blend your coffee with the MCT oil for 15 to 20 seconds until the mixture is uniform and creamy, similar to the texture of a latte. This creates a stable emulsion where the oil droplets are broken into microscopic particles, allowing for consistent and complete absorption. Optional, but highly recommended, add 1 teaspoon of grass-fed butter or ghee. This improves the texture substantially, extends the duration of ketone production, and adds butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that independently supports gut lining integrity. The fourth priority is timing. Consume your MCT coffee within the first hour of waking, before eating anything. Then delay your first meal by 2 to 3 hours. Most people find this surprisingly easy, the combination of caffeine, MCT oil, and the optional butter produces. Sustained satiety and mental clarity that makes postponing breakfast feel natural rather than forced. During this window, your body is burning stored fat, producing ketones, activating the stem cell protection pathway, and maintaining a glucose-poor environment that is inhospitable to cancer cell metabolism. Protect that window. Do not break it with food, especially carbohydrates, which will immediately spike insulin and terminate ketone production. The fifth priority is what to avoid. Do not add dairy, milk, or cream to this coffee. Dairy proteins bind to the beneficial compounds in coffee in the gut and significantly reduce their absorption before they ever reach your bloodstream. Studies measuring plasma compound levels with and without dairy have shown absorption reductions of 25 to 30%. If you want a creamy texture beyond the emulsified MCT, use unsweetened oat milk or coconut milk. Neither carries the binding problem. And avoid sugar, including honey and maple syrup in standard amounts. Even small sugar additions trigger an insulin response that directly interferes with the metabolic signaling we've spent this entire video building toward. Managing expectations is what determines whether people actually follow through. So let me tell you exactly what to expect and when. In the first 1 to 2 weeks, you will notice increased morning energy and mental clarity before you notice any change in body composition. The ketones from MCT oil are a preferred fuel for your brain's neurons, and many people describe a reduction in the mid-morning mental fog they had simply attributed to getting older. You will likely notice reduced morning hunger as well. Any change on the scale in this early period will mostly be water weight associated with modest glycogen reduction, 1 to 2 pounds. From weeks 3 through 8, fat loss becomes measurable. Expect a reduction of 1 to 2 pounds of actual fat per week. Abdominal circumference begins to decrease visibly. Energy continues to improve as the mitochondrial effects build. If you are doing any resistance training, even bodyweight exercises, strength will hold steady or improve despite the calorie reduction. That is the MCT-mediated muscle preservation effect working exactly as the research describes. By months 2 and 3, the deeper cellular changes are fully expressed. This is when people describe something that sounds almost too good to be true, feeling like they have the energy they had a decade ago. That is not placebo. That is measurably more mitochondria in your muscle cells running on a more efficient fuel. Biomarkers improve. Triglycerides typically drop 15 to 30%. HDL rises. Fasting insulin decreases. These are the same markers that predict cancer risk, cardiovascular risk, and biological age. Consistency at 70% is worth more than perfection for 2 weeks, followed by abandonment. Start simple. Build gradually. Give it 8 weeks before you evaluate. Now, MCT oil is extremely well tolerated by the vast majority of people over 60, but a few situations warrant caution. If you have active liver disease, consult your physician first. MCT oil is processed entirely in the liver, and impaired hepatic function can be worsened by high fat intake. If you have type 1 diabetes, physician supervision is essential, as the ketone production from MCT oil combined with insulin deficiency creates a risk of ketoacidosis. If you manage type 2 diabetes with insulin or sulfonylureas, monitor your blood glucose closely. MCT oil improves insulin sensitivity, which is generally positive, but can require medication adjustments. And if you are on warfarin, monitor your INR, as changes in fat intake can affect clotting parameters. For most people over 60 without these specific conditions, this is one of the most well-tolerated and evidence-supported dietary interventions available. So seniors, here's my challenge to you. Start with 1 teaspoon tomorrow morning. Blend it for 20 seconds. Delay breakfast by 2 hours. Give it 8 weeks. Your stem cells will be better protected. The metabolic environment that cancer cells exploit will become less hospitable. And the visceral fat wrapped around your organs will begin to decrease in a clinically validated, measurable way. You have more control over how you age than you have ever been told. So seniors, if this kind of evidence-based breakdown is useful to you, drop a comment below and let me know, have you tried MCT oil before? What was your experience? I read every single comment, and your questions directly shape what topic I talk about next. This is Dr. Sarah Ellison, and I'll see you in the next video.